I don't even have to watch a clock. I don't even have to watch a clock. I don't even have to watch a clock.
Hello. Welcome to the Bold Moves podcast. I am Mandy Bryce, and I am the host of this show. On Mondays, I like to do interviews with inspiring people who have departed their comfort zones and done bold moves that have paid off in some pretty fantastic ways. Last week was Katie French, who is a primal health coach, so in the paleo zone, and she's the creator of the Paleo Cooking Bootcamp. And I'm going to keep the health coach approach alive, but go with a very different approach and a very interesting story. This week, I chatted with Courtney Maiorino, who, as a young woman in college, was diagnosed with a chronic illness, Crohn's disease, and has actually turned it into a very positive thing and has a very inspiring story and some interesting advice to share. So, without further ado, here is Courtney Maiorino and her inspiring story. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Bold Moves podcast. I am so excited to have you meet Courtney Maiorino. Welcome to the show, Courtney.
Hey, Mandy. Thanks for having me. I'm super excited to be here.
I am so happy to have you. Now, of course, you know that the show is called Bold Moves, and you wouldn't be on here if you hadn't made a few. So why don't you share us a little bit about your story and the bold moves you've made?
So, I think my first bold move happened in college. So I'm sure I had a few prior to that, but the whole story kind of starts when I was in college.
Perfect.
I was having digestive issues as a freshman at the University of Maine. Really a lot of pain, a lot of other weird symptoms that I didn't really know what was going on. Okay. I was a normal, healthy college kid, so having something on my radar that was abnormal kind of confused me.
Sure, and you couldn't blame it on dorm food?
See, that's what I thought. I thought dorm food. I thought a little too much fun. I thought it's stress. I'm in college for the first time. Mm-hmm. And so I blew it off for the longest time. I had symptoms starting in 2009, and I blew it off until 2011.
Okay.
And so at that point, the quote-unquote stress that I had thought that it was, the symptoms hadn't worn off. And so my parents and I decided that it was time to figure it out because it wasn't going away. Symptoms were really uncomfortable, really painful. And in 2012, I was diagnosed with Crohn's. Mm-hmm. Crohn's disease is an inflammatory bowel disease. It's an autoimmune disease, and it affects the digestive tract from the mouth all the way through the whole tract.
I didn't know that. I had heard of it being, I guess, lower GI, but I didn't know it could be from all the way up into your mouth. That's really
So it can really present itself anywhere in the digestive tract, but mine's mostly in like my abdominal area.
Is that more common, or?
I think so.
Okay.
From all the people that I know, most of their inflammation is in the lower, like their abdominal area. Okay. But it can happen elsewhere.
Sure. Okay.
Yeah. The first bold move that I made was utilizing the college classes that I was taking at the time. So at the time that I was diagnosed with Crohn's, I was also simultaneously taking courses in wellness and nutrition and complementary medicine. I was learning about Reiki and meditation and all of these things.
I'm going to stop you there. So what were you majoring in? Because I don't feel like those are very, very common courses for most people in a traditional university.
Especially in Maine. Like, I was really surprised that I was at the University of Southern Maine at the time here in Portland. And I was really surprised to see that. Sure. I was originally majoring in nursing.
Okay.
But a few kind of upsets in my life, I wasn't doing as well as I needed to make the program. Okay. And it was kind of a wonderful stroke of luck that I didn't know that I needed.
Yeah.
And it dropped me in the center of a health and wellness concentrated major. And then I also minored in holistic and integrative health, learning about Reiki and things like that.
Interesting. Very cool. All right, please
Yeah.
continue. So I just thought that was really cool because I've heard of like smaller independent places doing those
Yeah.
kind of course offerings, and I'm in Southern California, so you would think everywhere would be doing that here.
Yeah.
But that's
It
super.
was, I mean, it was amazing. Honestly, that's where the bold move started, and that's where a fire was lit for real. I used all of the knowledge that I had and decided to use myself as an experiment. I really had no other option at the time. The Crohn's medication that I was taking wasn't really working for me,
Mhm.
and the way that I was living wasn't what I wanted for my life. I was in pain all the time. I was angry. I was upset and sad and didn't really want a lot to do with life at that point.
Mhm.
It was a really hard time in my life. So I decided, why not make a change and see if this overhaul pretty much works.
Sure. Okay. So tell us more about what you were experiencing leading up to that change, because I think you were saying a little bit more about what it's like to have Crohn's disease, and then what experiments did you do on yourself and what were the impacts of them?
So living with Crohn's disease it can be really tough. As a patient, I was told post-diagnosis, like right after, that I was going to be on meds for the rest of my life, that I wasn't going to be able to eat vegetables, anything with fiber, anything you would see in a normal, healthy diet. I was told that I wasn't going to be able to tolerate it. And I was told that, like, being in and out of doctor's offices was going to be my life. And for people that know me, they know that that doesn't sit well with me. I'm not a fan of taking pills. I go to the doctor when I need to, but I'm not a fan of being in there frequently.
Mm-hmm.
I prefer being more holistic and natural when possible. So this diagnosis for me really rocked my world. It was really a test for me to see what I was about, what I stood for, what I believed in terms of my health. And it really made me stand up and be able to find my voice in terms of advocating for myself and the way that I want to manage my disease.
Absolutely. So, I mean, the fact that you dealt with the symptoms and tried to kind of figure it out on your own for, you said, like 2 years before going to a doctor definitely shows that, you said, if you know me, I wouldn't prefer that type of lifestyle. And that makes complete sense to me. And one thing that I am having a hard time wrapping my head around is the idea of a doctor saying you can't have vegetables. And I'm not saying that I don't believe that, but what was the recommendation to do instead?
So a lot of the recommendations that IBD patients get is a low fiber diet.
Okay.
So a lot of plain, bland food. And
Okay.
I grew up in an Italian household. My dad used tons of garlic on everything and tons of spices, and everything had tons of flavor, and everything was delicious and homemade. And losing food in that way
Mm-hmm.
was really hard. It didn't sit well with me. And so I didn't resign myself to the fact that that was going to be my life. And so I decided personally that I was going to try everything that I could get my hands on. Any information that I could try,
Mm-hmm.
I did. And so for the next 5 years after my diagnosis, I've been on a journey to learn everything that I can
Mm-hmm.
about the world of holistic health and wellness, complementary medicine, energy medicine, to be able to figure out a way of living that works for me and resonates with how I want to live with this.
That's really interesting. I have a family member, and then one of our really close friends has Crohn's. And I guess just like many autoimmune diseases, it's something where if you looked at this guy, he's an athlete. He was part of the Air Force Academy and had to leave because of Crohn's. He was on a Division I baseball team in college and had to leave because of Crohn's. But like you mentioned, being in and out of the hospital, he'll randomly have to go, has, I guess, flare-ups, and it just seems like a really tough life, especially for such a young and healthy person. So I'm guessing that there is a happy ending or plot twist that goes in a good direction here. what did you do from having to, I mean, just the flavors that you're mentioning sounds terrible, but from a nutritional standpoint, I can't imagine, you know, being told to avoid the healthiest things you can have. So I'm really curious as to where you're heading here.
So the first thing that I changed in my eating style was cutting out dairy, because I had read with the research that I had done myself that dairy was a high inflammatory food. Not for everybody, but kind of across the board for a lot of people. And I wasn't really super attached to it anyway, so I figured it'd be the easiest thing to try and kind of remove. And it worked and it stuck, which was great. The two next things that I really tried to see if they sat well were gluten and meat. And growing up an Italian, both of those things were really hard to try and like opt out of.
Sure.
But doing that has helped in so many ways. I know some people who have Crohn's who are my really good friends who eat meat and it works for them. And so it's kind of individualized in terms of what works for people and what doesn't. But for me, meat doesn't work. It doesn't sit well with me and it makes me feel really uncomfortable.
Okay.
So once I made the connection between how it makes me feel and what the actual food was, it was easier to say that I just don't want to consume that. It was easier to choose
how you'll feel after.
Exactly. It was easier to choose other options than to put myself through something like that just for like flavor or for nostalgia or for force of habit or whatever it was.
It's so interesting that you say for nostalgia, because I have made big changes in the way that I eat as well, from growing up on a very processed food and fast food a lot. And every once in a while I'll crave something that like I know is terrible for me. I know won't even taste that good. I'm like, that I just know everything about it's disgusting, but I'll be like, but for some reason I really want like beefaroni, and I'm like, but I think it's totally that it's nostalgia and there's some sort of trigger, and then I usually am able to still avoid it. But exactly when you said that, I'm like, okay, so other people
no, it's totally not just you. I think it happens to everybody, whether you live with a chronic illness and you're altering your lifestyle or not. We're so used to eating food for pleasure that when we try and make healthier goals and intentions for ourselves, that's hard to break.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm glad I'm not alone, at least.
You are not alone. You are definitely not alone.
All right. So you cut out the dairy, you cut out meat, you cut out gluten. It sounds like the only things that are left are exactly what the doctors told you to avoid. Yep. And I am guessing that it's working well for you because you have a big smile on your face. So let's hear more about that.
So after I graduated from college with my bachelor's in wellness in 2013, I really loved what I was learning, and I really wanted to continue experimenting on myself, using myself as a lab rat. So I decided in 2014 to enroll in the Institute for Integrative Nutrition's health coach training program.
Okay.
They're a nutrition school out of New York City. It's a year-long online for me program that teaches us a ton of dietary theories and how to coach people and guide them towards healthier habits and all these things. And I graduated with that certification in 2015.
Okay.
And through that program, I learned about a plant-based diet.
Okay.
And so technically the term is vegan, but I'm not a fan of that word because that, again, also has a weird connotation with it. So I learned about that way of eating through that certification program, and I thought that I could never do it. I had seen people do it. I had read the literature. I had heard about people having success with it, especially in the Crohn's disease community. I have a few friends who are in full remission with no medication because of this way of eating.
Wow.
And I was like, I can't do this. I'm Italian. I love bread. Like, I eat meat. That's just the way that it is. But there came a time where I broke through all of the stories that I had grown up with. and let go of all of who I was in order to grow into a person that's going to be able to thrive and live well with this disease. And check my ego at the door, and I tried it.
Very cool. So I noticed you said, of course, that you don't like the word vegan because it does have a stigma, and I definitely agree that it does, even though one of my best friends is vegan. I'm curious, do you then, like, because I could say that I eat a plant-based diet, even though I eat a ton of dairy and I do eat meat, but my general goal is for like 3/4 of what I eat to be vegetables. And I am not anti-fruit. I just don't love it. So I have more of a savory palate than sweet. So I don't eat a ton of fruit, but I could say my diet is primarily plant-based. However, when you say it, it's obviously something different than when I say it, because yours is entirely plant-based, I'm guessing. And then, so I'm curious if you do other things that vegan people do, such as, for example, honey. Do you not eat honey as well? Because I know that some vegans consider that that's an animal product. Or like, where are the lines, I guess, of differentiation for you?
So for me, I don't eat any meat whatsoever, just because of the way that it sits in my digestive system. It makes me feel really not great. And then I also had a flare a few years back where, I don't know if any of your listeners have Crohn's, but if you do, you're going to know what I'm talking about, where you're in a flare and all you can do is eat like 2 foods, and that's it for like weeks on end. Okay. And so for me, in that last flare was scrambled eggs and brown rice for like a month on end, 3 times a day.
Okay.
And so that was before I was vegan, plant-based. Right. And so I don't eat eggs. Okay. Because I just can't do it. Okay. And then I don't eat honey because I'm not a fan of the taste, honestly. Okay. I don't know where I stand on the whole animal product thing. I mean, it is from bees, so yeah, sure. But I just don't like the taste of it, so I don't eat it. Got it.
Okay. I was just curious because I didn't know where, I'm vegan, but don't call me that kind of worked. So I thought I would see.
When I identify with how I eat, the way introducing myself as a vegan, it's hard. It's really hard for me to do because people just automatically have a certain picture of people who eat that way. Sure. And while I am so for the way that I eat and how it's helped me and how it continues to help me, I don't really want to be boxed into that label or that image or stigma or whatever it is.
Absolutely. I follow you on Instagram, and so I don't know who else you follow, but for a while I was following, I think he was called the Badass Vegan. Do you know what I'm talking about? That like ripped guy? Yeah. He's definitely breaking the stereotype of that one.
Yep. I know. I love it. I follow a ton of people on Instagram who are breaking that stigma of people who eat plant-based diets who are super skinny and they don't exercise, and it's amazing to see what they can do in terms of muscle building.
Absolutely. And I can identify with that because, well, the reverse of it, because I don't like to define myself as saying like paleo or primal, but I would say overall I follow those as guidelines. And even some of the people in that community who my husband was very tied to, like, I'll post a picture of something that has bread on Facebook and people will be like, but what about paleo? I'm like, oh my gosh, like I'm a person. I just eat what So people can get really, I think because there's so many emotions too tied to food where it becomes something's part of your identity, and I don't know, it gets kind of wild. So I totally understand why. I was just wondering kind of where your lines were.
Yeah, it gets kind of blurry, but I think that what I love about what's coming out in the wellness world right now is that it's less of I'm this or I'm this, and more of I eat the way that I do for me. Mm-hmm. And if it matches a quote unquote label, that's fine. And I can be a part of that community. Mm-hmm. And if it doesn't, I hope that people give me the respect that I deserve in terms of doing what I need to do to heal my body and live well. Yeah. Absolutely. And I see a lot of that in the chronic illness community, especially.
So I kind of interrupted your story. I want to hear where you went from 2015 when you got that certification to now, because I have more questions, but I have a feeling if I let you finish your story that you might answer them for me. So bring us to 2018.
Yeah, I mean, after 2015, I still had a few ups and downs with my health. Honestly, the way that I look at my health is not just an eating and exercise type of like way of dealing with this.
Mm-hmm.
The way that I love to look at it and the way that my sister and I are trying to help others look at it is a mind, body, soul approach. So diet, eating style, and exercise is only one piece of the whole puzzle in terms of living well with a chronic illness. And so after 2015, I really dove into how I want to manage this otherwise, besides the eating style, besides the exercise regimen, because I'd always been an athlete in high school, and that was somewhat easy for me to be consistent with.
Sure.
And now that I had the eating style down and that was working, then I wanted to dive into other things that I could utilize: holistic health modalities, complementary medicine therapies, functional medicine doctors, or other practitioners that could help me to really make this a whole body way of maintaining health.
I've heard you say the term complementary medicine, and honestly, it's the first time that I think I've heard it. Can you explain what exactly complementary medicine is?
So complementary medicine is modalities that are not alternative, because that's not like all the way they are, but their complementary medicine is an in-between between Western, which is traditional medicine, and alternative. So it's combining the two to really make the best approach for people. So I love like Reiki. I'm a Reiki master, energy medicine, all that stuff. I love meditation. I love yoga, all of these things that could come from the Eastern traditions, but that are now becoming also a little more mainstream and more well-known, and more utilized in terms of living well with illnesses.
Got it. Okay. That's kind of what I was imagining, but I just figured if I didn't know what it was, there was a strong possibility that someone else listening or watching might not. So I thought I'd have you cleared up, and I appreciate that. So thank you for that. You said that you and your sister were working on a more holistic approach. How are you two doing that now? And I guess what's her kind of Cliff's Notes version of the story and how she got roped into this with you?
Yeah, so after I got my cert in 2015, I decided that I wanted to do something with it, but it never really clicked for me. I wasn't gaining tons of clarity in terms of how I wanted to help people. I didn't know how to go about it. And then my sister started having strange symptoms as well. My sister's name is Christina. We're twins. And she had really strange symptoms that presented as like rheumatological, so like respiratory things, trouble breathing, swollen feet, bruising, all that stuff. And she went to a rheumatologist and was given a diagnosis of like sarcoidosis, which is inflammation in the chest cavity.
Okay.
And was given steroids for 6 months.
Wow.
And that 6-month stint of steroids did absolutely nothing for her.
Okay.
And so she got a referral for a functional medicine doctor from someone that she knew. And after extensive testing, she got diagnosed with mold toxicity.
Wow.
Yeah. So it's pretty, for her, it's more functional medicine based in terms of treatment. It's like all functional medicine based. She's pretty much seeing them exclusively and working with them in terms of fully detoxifying her body and bringing it back to normal.
Okay. How's it going for her?
It's going pretty well. It's honestly, living with chronic illnesses in general is such a trial and error process. And for her, she had no choice but to take the holistic approach. But for people who do have a choice, it takes a lot of hard work. It takes a lot of dedication. You have to remember your why all the time, because you're going to get sick of doing all the hard work at times. But it is one of the most rewarding, I can't even put into words how the journey is so worth it. And it's going well for her, but it's a long road ahead to continue to get better.
So what are the two of you doing and using your expertise? Has she gotten training as well? What is your job title now? How's this working?
So I'm a certified holistic health coach. She's actually in school right now. She's going to the University of Western States, their online program. They're out of Oregon, in Portland, Oregon. She's going for her master's in human nutrition and functional medicine.
Okay.
And she'll be done in about a year and a half, I think.
All right.
And she'll be a holistic nutritionist by the end of it.
Awesome. And so how are you working together now on the same mission?
Yeah, so once she got quote unquote sick and she started experiencing what she'd seen me go through for so long, and she finally realized like how I was feeling and how frustrating it is to navigate being a patient and dealing with doctor's appointments and medications and the dynamic that comes with being a patient and being in the medical system.
Mm-hmm.
She realized that she also wanted part of what I was trying to do. So together, about a year ago, we've started a health coaching practice.
Okay.
It's called the Thrive Effect, and we work
I like it.
with chronic illness patients to empower them to thrive in all aspects of their lives. So it's not just in terms of their disease, but we really want them to start there,
Mm-hmm.
and then have that like radiate out to their entire life. Because people with chronic illnesses, at least I did, we sometimes feel like we don't deserve to live a full life. We're not like well enough to do what we love and have this amazing life, and that we're destined for a life of pain and suffering. And that's the thought process that sometimes comes with it. And we really want to help people start with food and start with the mindset and start with the soul work and really radiate it out into living their life to its fullest potential.
I love that. Now, I've kind of figured that was the route that you had taken, and now that I know, I'm curious. You've mentioned balance, and you mentioned, I think, because of that fact that you mentioned that, you eat a plant-based diet because that's what works for you, and you seem to have a good idea around balance. I'm wondering, do you encourage most of your clients to follow a plant-based diet, or is it similar to kind of what you did to dial in your nutrition, and that you're just saying, hey, try this, maybe do a Whole30 and eliminate one thing at a time and just see how you feel? Or how does that work for you? Would you say most of your clients are vegan or follow the plant-based diet, or how does that work?
So my apartment household is split in half. So I'm plant-based. My sister is not. We're both gluten-free because that's what makes us feel best. Okay. And so we come from both sides. So we agree 100,000 million% on the fact that everybody should try and eat more vegetables.
Yeah, I think that's...
in any form that they can. So if you need to juice them, go for it. You need to puree them, go for it. Whatever way that you can ingest them and get them into your body, we agree on that 1,000%.
I'm with you there.
I think that's something that everybody in the wellness world can agree on.
Yes.
In terms of pigeonholing clients, I've seen amazing results with a plant-based diet, and I know a lot of people that have. We don't encourage our clients to go any which way. We really want to hold space for them to figure out what's best for themselves. Mm-hmm. And if that's a plant-based diet, that's fantastic. Mm-hmm. If that includes like 90% plant-based and 10% organic grass-fed beef like my sister does, that's fantastic. Mm-hmm. We're all really, really different people, and we all have diseases, but they all present themselves differently based on our makeup. Mm-hmm. So I think that pigeonholing people without the knowledge that that way of eating is going to work for everyone, I don't know if that would do them a service. What we do ask our clients to do is come in with an open mind.
Yeah.
So be ready to try anything and everything.
That
in terms of eating style, in terms of like modalities that you add in, stress management techniques, all of that. Because my sister and I really have tried a whole lot of things.
Mm-hmm.
And we love nutrition, but I'm also obsessed with anything energy medicine,
Mm-hmm.
Reiki, meditation. So like things that are a little woo-woo, and some people may not be super open-minded, but we ask them to at least try, because these things truly have changed both of our lives. And we really want to just share all of the information that we've like collected together and the experiences that we had to help our clients expand their toolbox to be able to help them in any ways that they need it.
I love hearing that. And this may be a testament to the fact that you prefer to say you're plant-based because of how it sits with your body versus just calling yourself vegan. But I think one of the stigmas that you mentioned that go along with when people hear the word vegan is that sometimes those people, and the same thing with primal and paleo, I think people get to be preachy and try to tell people that this is what makes sense and this is what everyone should be doing. So it's relieving to hear that, you know, you're not just like, okay, my way or the highway, because like you said, we are all so different, whether it is with a chronic illness or not. You know, it's silly to believe that, you know, 8 billion human beings should all be eating the same. So right. I'm glad to hear that. Another thing that I was thinking about as you were talking that I wanted to bring up is now slipping my mind. So I might need a second, or I might want to go back to, oh, I know exactly what it is. Okay. So you were talking about just going into things with an open mind, whether it is how you're going to eat, how you're going to live, how you're going to manage stress. And I think that that's such a healthy approach to it. And I think it's something that more people, again, even if they don't have a chronic illness, should be more open to, especially if they are trying to reach a certain goal. So I think you have to hit a certain level of a pain point, and a chronic illness might be what pushes you past that. Whereas if you're just like, oh, I'm kind of chubby, I should consider reducing my stress so that I don't have a ton of cortisol and that's contributing to it. Or I should sleep more so that I'm not, you know, not getting the rest I need to have my body work the way it should. What do you think of, like, how do most people react to the, okay, I need to be open-minded and try things that might be woo-woo, or try things that may have sounded crazy to eat before? Do most people think like, okay, I'm at my wit's end, I'll do anything, or do you still get some resistance?
I think it's a little bit of both. I think that we attract people who deep down at a soul level are ready for change.
That makes
sense.
But
like you said, chronic illness is hopefully the turning point, which it was for me. I've overhauled my life in ways that I never expected because of my chronic illness. But I also think that there are stories and there are limiting beliefs and there are ingrained ways of living that we have, not only in our bodies and in our brains, but like in our cells that are there that we're holding on to. So making a large change, like integrating complementary medicine into your treatment protocol when you've been told that medication is the way to go, or when you've grown up Italian and you eat meat 24/7, but then, oh, let's try a plant-based diet and see how it goes. Or you're used to taking an anti-anxiety medication, when somebody suggests, oh, try meditation or emotional freedom technique, which is tapping, or acupuncture, or other things that you can utilize that will have the same effect but have less stress on your body. I think that it takes a person to hold space for somebody in that, because it's super vulnerable to be in that spot. I've been there. And it's really hard to admit to yourself that you need to check your ego at the door. And you need to, if you ever want to move past this current reality that you're in, you need to make a change.
Yeah, that seems totally true. And I guess it goes back to what you said, where you said you let go of all of that you were in order to make this change. And I think that's something that's really hard. So I commend you for that. And then it's really great that you're helping other people to do that as well. I'm curious, now that you brought up being Italian again, I was a vegetarian for a little bit, and I remember a couple of Thanksgivings where my family gave me a hard time. How did your family react to the change? Were they just, because you had been ill so long, just like, do whatever you got to do? Or did you get some, like, here's some sausage, Like, you need to eat this, kind of pushback from some family members?
I think we don't know what we don't know. Like, I think that when we don't know about something, we tend to get scared, or if we don't understand something, we tend to meet it with doubt or fear. And my family has been super supportive about everything that I've tried to do over the last 5 years. So I commend them and love them for that 1,000%. But in the beginning, it was definitely new for them. I mean,
Sure.
my parents are wonderful people, but telling them that I'm no longer eating meat and that I'm not going to eat the traditional food that we used to eat, I think was a hard pill to swallow, because I think that if you know of any of these European style families, so French, Italian, Greek, food is love for people in general, but definitely for people like that. And I think that telling people that you love that you're not going to eat their food when they are from a heritage like that is very hard. It's like kind of like slapping them in the face almost.
Right.
And that's what it felt like at first.
Mm-hmm.
But I think as the eating style that I chose proceeded to give me results that I wanted and that my parents and my family wanted for me, they understood why I did it, and they continue to understand why I continue to do it. And we've even brought food to family functions and had them try it, and they've definitely become healthier, happier versions of themselves because of my illness. We've definitely opened a lot of doors for conversation and new foods and ways of cooking together that not only taste great, but benefit our bodies too.
That's fantastic. I was going to ask that next, as if it's had any spillover of you impacting your family beyond your sister and what they're eating. Now, purpose is an interesting piece for me, because I think there's a lot of people look at it all differently, and some people believe there's one purpose that you have your whole life. Some people have purposes for a season. Some people appear to be living their purpose but then don't even know what it is. So any answer is okay. I guess just the same balanced, holistic approach as we were talking about nutrition applies to this question. And I think you would at least fall, in my opinion, to someone whose purpose seems evident. But I'm curious if you know what it is, and if so, if you don't mind sharing what it is.
I think that prior to 2012, I didn't. I was someone who wanted to fit in at all costs. I didn't know who I was outside of high school crowds and soccer teams and classrooms and doing well in Spanish and English, and I identified hardcore with those labels.
Sure.
And so 2012 was a turning point for me where all of that was stripped. I was now a patient in the medical system, and I really needed to figure out what I stood for and who I was and how I wanted to navigate the rest of my life. And I think that I wouldn't be the person that I am today. I know that I wouldn't be the person that I am today without being diagnosed with Crohn's. And I truly feel like, at least for right now, and that I hope for my life going forward, that my purpose is to help people thrive and live well with their chronic illnesses. I really feel like both my sister and I were put in these situations with these perspectives, with these unique interests and talents and gifts to be able to help people, really guide them to transform their lives and really like live in harmony with something that is thought of as horrible and painful and bad. And yeah, it can be hard. And I know that from personal experience that thriving with a chronic illness doesn't mean that there aren't bad days or bad weeks or bad months.
Sure.
But it means that you know how to navigate them, and you have tools in your arsenal that you can turn to, and you have a mindset that fosters positivity and health and remission and good vibes, so that you know deep down that you're going to be okay.
Absolutely.
And I know that deep down in my heart that that's my purpose, at least for right now.
Yeah.
I also feel like my sister and I are put here to stretch the medical system. We really believe in pioneering a movement or helping pioneer a movement that integrates more of these holistic modalities into treatment protocols for patients. Right now, that's not the case. And we've seen personal experience from us living with it that it works. We've seen friends, new friends who have illness. We've seen that it works for them. And we continue to meet people on our journey who have same experience with integrating wellness modalities into their treatment and that it's working for them. And it doesn't need to be all wellness or all traditional medicine. We think that the best combination is some of both when needed. And we really want to stress somehow, some way to the medical system that that's needed and that patients want this, because we need to know all of the information that's out there for us post-diagnosis as soon as possible to be able to start living well sooner.
Absolutely. I think you're hitting the nail right on the head about changes that need to happen in the medical system, because I think so often practitioners are eager to prescribe pills versus lifestyle changes. And I think as a culture, at least in the United States, many people are much more interested in a quick fix that they can just swallow a pill versus the hard work that you have done to dial in your nutrition, manage your stress, physical fitness, the mental health, all balanced into one. So I commend you for that for sure. And I think it's really fantastic the way that you've turned something that for many people is a really terrible situation into something very empowering for you and a change for other people. So I think that that's great too. Both you and your sister together. I really like that.
We really are trying to make this be a positive thing. And that's, I think, another mindset shift that the chronic illness community could potentially utilize, is that just because you have an illness doesn't mean that being angry and being frustrated and being mad at it, that's not the dialogue and the story that you have to have. You can thrive, you can live well, you can live in harmony, and you can learn from your disease each and every day. And that's what we really want to help people learn how to do, because when you know your own body and you know how to listen to your intuition, then you know how to give your body what it needs.
Sure. So if someone's listening to this and thinking, wow, this is exactly what I need to work with these ladies, how do they find you online? And or if they just think your story is great and want to follow your journey, where are you on social media? How can people get in touch with you either as a potential client or as a support system?
So my sister and I are both on Instagram. I'm Courtney Maiorino. Last name is Maiorino. And my sister is Christina. And we're both on Facebook as well. First name, last name. Okay. Our business is also on both Instagram and Facebook. It's at the Thrive Effect. And our website is www.thrive-effect.com.
Fantastic. And I'll make sure that's all in the show notes as well so that people can find that easily. Now, a lot of the things that we talked about, of course, have been focused on chronic illnesses, but I think almost everything that you've said is something that people without chronic illnesses could benefit from as well. Do you only work with people who have chronic illnesses? And if so, any chronic illness, or how does that work?
So our niche population who we're really called to serve is people with chronic illness and autoimmune disease. Okay. My specialty in particular is Crohn's and ulcerative colitis because I have a background in it.
Sure.
But any illness that is chronic that people deal with, we'd love to help them work through and transform their thought process and help them live better with. And unfortunately, there's a rise in chronic illness as a whole in this country. So I don't know if I know someone who doesn't have something that they deal with that's chronic.
Sure.
So anyone that feels called to work with us or support us or know more about us, please reach out. We really want to help people live well and like love themselves and their lives. And it's really our passion to do so.
That's awesome. So if someone's listening and thinking, well, I don't even know what exactly chronic illnesses are since you say it's so common. Do you have a list of the most common chronic illnesses that you hear about?
I mean, I think it's the most common ones are ones that are in your scope. So for me personally, I hear obviously a lot about Crohn's and ulcerative colitis because that's what I live with.
Sure.
I also hear a lot about diabetes. Obviously, that's super common. Heart disease, that's super common. I mean, anything like that. Also, ones that aren't super common that are coming up are like mold toxicities, biotoxin stuff, a lot of stuff that's super new that we don't know a lot about or know a lot about how to treat, but are still super important in terms of getting holistic help fast because those things can turn pretty nasty pretty quickly. But yeah, I think it's unfortunately too many to list that are common at this point, which is a really sad thing.
That is a really sad thing, but I am feeling blessed that I can't think of anything that affects my husband or I, at least.
That's
so
fantastic.
There's at least two people that would not be a good fit for at least your niche. Although I think your services, like I said, so many people could use balance. So many people could use improving their nutrition and trying new things and stress management, of course. So I think that that's definitely necessary. I'm curious throughout the story, and it may be something you've mentioned already, it may not be, but what is the scariest thing you've ever done?
Skydiving.
All right. I loved skydiving. When you were
This
scared.
was way back, but way before Crohn's. But
Yeah.
I think kind of present day scariest, and it's a scary in a different way. Skydiving was definitely scary, but that was old Courtney skydiving. I wasn't who I am now when I went skydiving.
Okay.
I think present day, the scariest thing that I'm doing right now is a twofold. So trying to grow this movement, speaking out about what my sister and I believe in, and really trying to help people and putting ourselves out there is super scary. And also writing a book about my experience with chronic illness and really trying to create a resource for people that they can utilize when they need it. I really want to write a resource that I needed when I was younger so that it can help people in that stage of life. Because if I had something like that, I think my process would have been expedited a lot faster. So trying to put my experience into words, not being a perfectionist, not trying to overthink it, and all of that is super scary too.
Absolutely. Well done is sometimes better than well planned. You just have to get the action going. When you are maybe in a moment of temporary paralysis, when thinking about whether or not you should post something or whether or not you should include something in your book, how do you push past that fear?
Honestly, I think of myself at 21 and how really, really poorly I felt about my life situation, myself, what I was going to do with my life, how this was all going to play out. And I also think of everybody that's out there right now that is in pain and suffering, living with either a disease like me, like UC or Crohn's, or with something else that's chronic that they're dealing with, and they don't know this information. And so when I feel like I want to play small, or when I feel like I don't want to share, or when I feel like I don't want to work on something, I think of those people and like that version of myself. And that's what pushes me and my sister forward both, is serving and creating for people who really, really need it. And I think that that's the only way that we would continue to do this, is through a place of service.
That's fantastic, and we appreciate you for that. You mentioned wishing you were able to give your 21-year-old self advice. And so I'm curious if you have any other advice that you want to share to anyone listening. Maybe it's something that you wish you had learned. Maybe it's something that you learned recently that was really impactful, but any general advice for the listeners or viewers?
Love yourself through the process. That took me a really long time to realize. And that lesson came through a meeting with somebody, one of the people that's made a huge impact on my life. her and her book and her work and her words really made an impact on me to look at not only my disease and my life because of my disease differently, but looking at myself differently. Prior to that point, I've always been really hard on myself, and I'm sure I'm not the only one.
No.
And I come from that mindset. Like, that was my baseline growing up, is I was super hard on myself.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't really register how to like truly come from a place of love for myself. And now that I had this disease, it was super important to come from that space.
That makes sense, because having the hard on yourself mentality is just adding more stress, which I imagine exacerbates symptoms.
Oh yeah, 1,000%.
Again, I think that's something that applies to everyone, but in a more extreme circumstance when you have that chronic illness. Now, you mentioned this mentor and her book. What books do you have to recommend? I'm curious, of course, to what one that one is, but then if you have any other books that you think people would enjoy reading or get a lot out of, I'd love it if you shared them.
So the book that I was talking about is called The Loving Diet by Jessica Flanagan.
Okay.
She's a clinical nutritionist who works with a lot of people who have chronic illness. I met her a few years back at a wellness retreat for people who have Crohn's and ulcerative colitis. And we sat, and I first learned about her book at that retreat.
Okay.
And at that point in my life, I was super angry and super resentful towards what was happening to me.
Mm-hmm.
And her book was dropped into my lap at the exact time that I needed it, and showed me a different way of seeing my disease in my life at this point.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that everybody with a chronic illness should read it. I think that it's a game changer.
That's fantastic. Do you have any other recommendations? If not, just one is good too. Of course, we'll want to read yours when it comes out.
Yeah, working on that slowly but surely. It's coming along. I love A Return to Love by Marianne Williamson.
Okay.
I think that now that I have the foundational aspects of living well with Crohn's kind of down in terms of eating style, exercise, I'm really diving more into like mindset and energy healing, and how coming from a loving perspective is really going to shift this for me and make it like a long-term thing. Our mindsets and the way that we hold energy and the way that we perceive ourselves is huge, and it's something that we don't really know a lot about or understand a lot about. Mm-hmm. And I'm making it a point for myself to learn more about that so that I can come from a more holistic perspective for myself, mm-hmm. and then in turn come from a more holistic perspective for my future clients as well. I
love that. Thanks for the recommendation. Every once in a while I get duplicate recommendations, and I was just commenting on an interviewee from the past who recommended that book. I was commenting on one of her pictures yesterday, and now here it is again. So maybe it's a sign that it's time for me to check that one out. Marianne Williamson is behind my favorite quote, which is the deepest fear quote.
Yes, that is my favorite quote too.
Yes. So I don't know how I've managed to not read that book yet, but I think this is divine intervention that it's time to check that out. Definitely. Dive in and let me know what you think. I absolutely will. So you mentioned when you found this book by Jessica Flanagan that you were at a very angry and resentful time, and it seems that you've come through that. My final and favorite question to ask is, if 8-year-old Courtney could look into a crystal ball and see where you are today and all the things that you've been through, as well as your foreseeable future, you can tell what you're doing in the next couple weeks, most likely, or potentially even further. On a scale of 1 to 11, how excited would little Courtney be to see into that crystal ball and see the future? I think 11. I love it. I think that I keep telling people, and this is a conversation that I've had with multiple people over the last few weeks, I wouldn't go back to high school, to college, to middle school for anything in the world. Even though that this new way of living is difficult at times, it's frustrating at times, it's downright maddening at times, I think I'm more myself now, and I've come home to myself more now than I've ever been in my entire life. And
I think that it can only go up from here, and I'm really excited to see what the future holds.
I love it. I'm so happy to hear that. Well, Courtney, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for what you're doing in the world for so many people, and what we can tell you're going to be doing once this resource you're making is available, and both for you and your sister. I appreciate it. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be able to share my story and meet your listeners.
It warms my heart so much when I get to chat with someone who has had something that a lot of people would find devastating happen to them, like diagnoses, accidents, and other tragedies, and are able to still give me an 11 and talk about how positive that challenging thing has become in their lives. So I really enjoyed that perspective to Courtney. And I think that this message is really important for anyone, whether you have a chronic illness or not, to do some self-experimentation and to really consider things that might be a little bit out of your comfort zone. Big shock that I would recommend that to help improve your life, whether it is your physical health, your mental health, or of course taking the holistic approach to improving both by working on both at the same time. So I really appreciate and want to acknowledge Courtney and her sister Christina, who I haven't had the chance to speak with on that. And as someone who's working on writing a book, I can absolutely appreciate what she means by not overthinking and being paralyzed by putting yourself out there and thinking of that. So kudos to Courtney and Christina for doing what they're doing. If you know somebody who has a chronic illness that might benefit from listening to Courtney's wisdom and her experiences, or like I said, this applies to anyone, if you know someone who would enjoy this, I would really appreciate it if you shared this podcast with them. My goal is to help improve as many lives as I possibly can, and really the only way I can do that is by reaching more people. And so I would love to rely on you, amazing listeners or viewers, for doing that. So please share. Also, please subscribe so that your phone automatically downloads, or at least alerts you to download the new podcasts as they come out. The more downloads there are, then iTunes is like, hey, people are liking this. I'm going to suggest it to other people. So that helps me big time. Please, please do that. And speaking of iTunes suggesting it, they do it even more if you leave me a review. So I know I beg for a review at the end of episode, but it's because every episode, but it's because I really do appreciate it. So if you can hook me up with that, I would be so happy. Now, stay tuned for Friday. I don't like just giving motivation and inspiration and having it be not used. So let this fuel you for a challenge to come on Friday from Courtney. Also, if you know anybody else who has an inspiring story and has made bold moves, or if you have yourself, please head to www.mandiem.com/guest. And if you would like to see more of what Courtney had to say and don't remember her social media handles or don't remember her website link, you can catch all of that, including pictures and other resources, in the show notes at www.mandiem.com/episode 137, because this is the 137th episode. I can't believe it. Okay, anyway, thank you so much for listening. I appreciate your time. And as always, be bold and have a sparkly day. Bye-bye.